For things to have value, they have to register in the experiential realm. Makes no sense to talk about value when there's nothing that is experiencing the value of it. In a lifeless universe, there would be no value. There could be no value. What could make anything better or worse if nothing is experiencing anything as better or worse? So I think about that a lot because I think actually from that a lot of things follow. But in particular, I want to talk about that's led me to think about the idea of the creative because the creative has an objective quality of something new, but the value we find in it has a lot to do with the quality of experience. And so I was thinking about the creative several years ago and kept on trying to articulate the value of the creative. And I came up with something that I was happy to publish, and I'll read it here. It won't take a whole long time, maybe interrupted with commentaries. One might say that I was fated to see creativity as something of great value. Consider, when my brother and I were deciding what to put on our mother's gravestone, what we came up with and felt hit the nail on the head was, quote, devoted to family and creative expression, unquote. So clearly, she valued creativity, as she showed in the poems and plays she wrote, the paintings she painted, and the bedtime stories she made up on the spot when putting my brother and me to bed. Add to the fact that our mother was a great teacher, as I've often been told at reunions by my high school classmates who had her for world literature. So being around her for much of the time for the first 17 years of my life, I got taught in a variety of ways that creativity made life more fun, more fulfilling. Creativity can be defined as coming up with something that's new and of value. Of value can mean the value of truth or of beauty or of usefulness. Creativity's value can be manifested in works of art, in new insights, in problem solving in any endeavor, or in the spontaneous play of human interactions. That's one of the things I kind of would like to be able to talk about someday, about human interactions. I really love the conversations that unfold in creative ways. Now that while I've got this interruption talking about my mom, it makes me think about family culture. Every family has its way of teaching how to get meaning and value. Some people do it through religious observance. My family culture had a lot to do with finding it in creativity. And I kind of like that particular root of the spirit, though I know that there are others that are just as fulfilling. So I said a value can be all kinds of different things. But the newness in itself points to an important value in creativity. To see how that is, think of the creative as the opposite of the habitual. Habitual being seeing and doing things in the well-worn way. There's no denying that the habitual is also of great value, even necessary. If it weren't for habits, we wouldn't be able to tie our shoes mindlessly in the morning or drive a car while having a conversation. A habit is a trail well worn as we traverse our life. The motto of the habitual is, it worked before, so let's keep doing it. And by worked, habit means that it led to a satisfactory outcome. That makes the habitual, that is, doing what's worked, a fine strategy for winning the game of dead versus alive. Survival, avoiding defeat, is the goal in that game. And given that for billions of years, natural selection has been mostly about selecting out through death, a satisfactory outcome is plenty good. But the habitual also has a cost. Experiencing things, seeing, feeling, thinking, acting, in habitual ways may work, but repetition over time tends to drain things of their meaningfulness, which means of one's experiencing of their meaningfulness. Like the face of one's wife is just there, and it isn't filled with the beauty that one has previously experienced through one's love. The mountain across the way is just there, rather than being the dramatic expression of the earth that also bore us, and a marvel for that. The proverb becomes shop-worn and no longer packs the punch it did when some creative person first came up with it. So while apropos of that, I think about the image of connecting the dots, which became so big a deal in the aftermath of 9/11. You know, the failure to connect the dots. And when I first heard that, I thought, oh, that's really a good metaphor. It reminded me of stuff in the comic books when I was a kid, and how you'd connect the dots and gradually the figure would emerge because you had connected the dots. And then people kept on using it. Pretty soon it wasn't exciting at all. So while the habitual helps keep us alive, it also has a deadening effect. It turns out that the dead has two meanings, and that the game of dead versus alive is really two games. The second game is about deadened versus feeling alive. Again, it's the experiential dimension here. The spiritual task in life is not just to keep drawing breath. I don't remember if I was conscious of spirit and its origins etymologically in breath. Well, the spiritual task in life is not just to keep drawing breath, but also to go deeper into experiencing the value of being alive. So while the habitual is a fine strategy for staying alive, the creative is one of the good strategies for feeling alive. And one of the good strategies, because creativity ain't the only way that we get a richness of experience. On my website, there's a piece called The Sacred Space of Lovers, which I commend to your, it's just another route to experiencing life in a very positive way. So while the habitual plays to avoid defeat, creativity is a way of playing to win. Creativity breaks out of the habitual in new ways of seeing, or new ways of understanding, new ways of putting things together, new ways of interacting with the world. Getting around the shop-worn and stale to encounter the world freshly, the creative mode enlightens through its newness. I don't know why that particular. I don't think I talk about poetry down here, but sometimes I'll hear from a line of poetry that a new way of seeing something that I've seen before, but now it stands out. Like connecting the dots, I guess. Okay. The creative mode enlivens through its newness. As creativity enlivens the experience of the creative person, so also does it give experiential benefit to the wider world. When the rest of us take in the fruits of others' creativity in a movie or a poem, I did say poem, or some illuminating breakthrough theory or an improvised joke, we too experience some kindred breakthrough into what is new and alive. The Impressionist painters saw the world in a new way and were valued by those they taught to see it in that new way too. Almost everything of value that makes up our civilization started out as an act of creativity. Indeed, were it not for human creativity, our kind would not have its unique place in the world as the only one among all of Earth's creatures to invent its own way of life. I then say such benefits, but inventing our own way of life has turned out to be a mixed bag, but I'll get back to that in a second. Such benefits are why we honor the Mozarts and Shakespeares and Michelangelos of the world, as well as the Edisons and Einsteins. And then I end with a political pitch for we should foster creativity in the schools rather than stifle it as they often do. But I don't think that was a good way to end that piece. I just never came up with anything better. But anyway, one of the things that I say in my Better Human Story, it connects with saying basically that we are better creatures than we've thought ourselves to be. That it did not require of us in our inborn nature anything particularly ugly for us to have precipitated ourselves into the ugliness we see in human history. All it required was that we have the intelligence, the cultural orientation, and the creativity that are required to start inventing your own way of life. The rest comes automatically with that, inevitably. I think that that's actually a big point. In terms of the spiritual understanding of the human situation, I think it is important for us to know that this ugliness that we see in human history and in the world around us is not a picture of who and what we are. That our religious traditions and a lot of our intellectual traditions have failed to see what's shaped this world into to contain as much brokenness as it does. So I think that it's my own creativity has led me to want to show something about what's happened to humankind that will make us more able to create a world that can survive for the long haul rather than destroy ourselves because we've unleashed a force of destruction that we've failed to understand and overcome in time. Anyway, that's one of the ways of looking at creativity as a spiritual value. It does connect with celebrating what we are. Uh, I don't know anything about God, but I don't know who's in whose image, but we are the creatures in whom life fashioned creativity to a far, to a much greater, way greater extent than it ever happened before. And it remains to be whether the spirit of life will triumph on the path that creativity has taken us on, or whether we will succumb to the spirit of death that inevitably emerges, as I claim to show, when a creature steps onto the path of civilization. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening.